So people sometimes come to me, friends and colleagues, and ask me for marketing advice. And almost every time we realize they don't have a marketing problem, they have a strategy problem. And people don't even understand what strategy is. There are almost no books about strategy. Generals and MBAs, maybe, but in general, we think what we need is planning. And planning is about control. Planning is if I do all these things, I'll get what I want. That's not strategy. Strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It's what will I give up today to invest over time to make it likely that I get a better tomorrow.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we're talking to Seth Godin, author of the new book, This is Strategy. I cannot believe you got that title. It's such a good title. Seth is the author of 21 international bestsellers that have changed the way people think about work and art. They have been translated into 38 languages, and his breakthrough books include Unleashing the Idea Virus, Permission Marketing, Purple Cow, Tribes, The Dip, Linchpin, The Practice, and This is Marketing. He writes for the most popular daily blogs in the world and has given 5 TED Talks. He is the founder of the Alt MBA, the former VP of Direct Marketing at Yahoo, and the founder of the pioneering online startup Yoyodyne. You can learn more about him at sethgodin.com. Welcome to the show, Seth Godin.
Thank you for having me. It's been too long. I've been waiting to be here. Here I am. Hi.
I'm glad to have you. This is a big day for the show. Now, as you know, everybody who's listening, we like to start the show with the same question every time. And it's even better when you have a Seth Godin answering this question. The question is this: tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
Other people. I learned early on that it doesn't matter how sure I am that I am right, how clever my solution is, or how urgent the problem appears to me. If other people don't want it, don't like it, don't need it, it doesn't matter. And I had to learn to embrace empathy, to realize I don't see what other people see, I don't believe what other people believe, and that's okay. And we have to take a deep breath and go to where they are, as opposed to waiting and insisting that they come to where we are.
That is called leadership, by the way. If more of our leaders took what you said and put it on a piece of paper and hung it behind their desk, it would be an easier world to live in. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Now, speaking of big ideas, you have written this new book called This is Strategy. Let's just start there. Why did you choose to write this book now?
So people sometimes come to me, friends and colleagues, and ask me for marketing advice.
Yeah.
And almost every time we realize they don't have a marketing problem, they have a strategy problem. And people don't even understand what strategy is. There are almost no books about strategy. Generals and MBAs, maybe, but in general, we think what we need is planning. And planning is about control. Planning is if I do all these things, I'll get what I want. That's not strategy. Strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It's what will I give up today to invest over time to make it likely that I get a better tomorrow. And we've been indoctrinated into refusing to think about that and instead just, quote, doing our job. So I wrote this book so I could hand it to the people I care about and say, let's talk about this when you're ready.
It's an interesting insight because, you think about every major company out there has a chief strategy officer or somebody who does that with a different name, right? But as I think back to my education, the one strategy thing that I read, I loved it, by the way, and he's been on the show, is Michael Porter, the 5 Forces and that stuff. That's from, I believe, the 80s. Mm-hmm. It's been 40 years. And yet I can't name I would struggle to name a book about strategy. And believe me, as we have a podcast, you get every book in the mail. So yeah, it's interesting that the bookshelf is very thin for strategy books.
Well, it takes humility to realize that the world is moving day by day, with or without you, and that we have to bring empathy and system thinking and games thinking to the clock as it unfolds in front of us. We don't get to be a toddler and insist. We have to be an adult and say, I see this happening. One of the things I talk about in the book, I live right near the Hudson River. Hudson River in many places looks like a lake. And the difference between a lake and a river is current. And a photograph will never show you current. But if you are paddling with the current, it's so much easier than if you're going upstream. But we walk around thinking that life is a lake, that it's just this calm body of water. We get to go in any direction we want. But in fact, the systems all around us are pushing things. That doesn't mean we have to accept it, but we have to acknowledge it and say, I see this, because better waves make better surfers. And it's more important to go find the conditions you need than to whine about the ones you've got.
Yeah. Why choose to go against the current when you can find a way to go with it and move faster with less effort?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you're going. I have chosen not to go with the current of TikTok and Twitter and the rest of, like, how do I make everything as dumb and as short as I can? Yeah. If I had done that, I would have gotten a lot more followers. Yeah. But that's not where I want to head. But at least I saw where the current could take me.
Now, you have organized the book around what you call the 4 threads, which are time, games, empathy. That shows up again. I like that. And systems in strategy. So talk about those threads and how they fit into your vision of strategy.
So I'm a game designer in my spare time. That's where I started my career. Monopoly is a terrible board game. And the word game, when we hear it, we think of things like Monopoly. That's not what a game is. A game is a situation with players and rules and outcomes, often with scarcity. And so it is a game to figure out how to get from the Atlanta airport to JFK when the planes aren't working the way they're supposed to. Which move will I make? What will I spend my time doing? Should I rent a car and go do this? Should I talk to this person? Should I charter a plane? That's a game. There are pieces to move around. Time, as I mentioned, is the invisible axis. It's the thing that's unfolding. We're not hunters. We are farmers. A farmer doesn't plant a seed and expect an apple tomorrow. The process of planting an apple tree is an ongoing multi-year event. And the same thing is true when you launched a podcast. So you're 480 episodes and whatever, 500. Yeah. When you had episode number 1, I'm guessing you only had 100 listeners.
Not even.
But you didn't
My mom.
Right. But you didn't say the podcast is a failure.
Yeah.
You said, I'm planting the seed now. How do I nurture it?
Yeah.
The third one is systems. And systems are so easy to ignore. So let's talk about the most famous system, which is the solar system. Everyone knows what the solar system is. We can argue about Pluto. But the solar system, Earth doesn't rotate around the sun because it wants to, because it feels like it, because it likes the sun. It rotates around the sun because of the invisible force of gravity. Well, the wedding industrial complex is a system. People don't wear tuxedos and those ridiculous dresses because they want to. Yeah. They do it because an invisible force of status and affiliation forces them to. So when we think about how we're going to change the world, how our project is going to work, I think we need to see the system and name it, see the time and track it, figure out what game we're playing and what resources we have. And don't try to build a fire if you don't have enough kindling to burn the log that's in front of you.
I'm very impressed by the use of the word game. I guess it's going to stick with me. Every podcast, I think about the things I'll be repeating to people for the next 5 years. And the notion of game is interesting because it forces you to integrate fun and curiosity into something that could feel unfun and painful.
Yeah. I think that, like, one of the rules of pitching a VC should be that the first line of your business plan and your presentation should be, this might not work. Because if you can say this might not work, you understand there's a game involved, not this has to work and here's why. And if failure is not an option, then neither is success.
And that's the system, because the system, everybody has agreed implicitly, we're all going to act like this is going to be the next unicorn, where we all know, like, just look at the stats. That is not true. It is a game, not a system. But, I like that. Okay. So that fresh insight for everybody right out of the oven. FOMO. Now I want to get into systems a little bit more, but I want to talk about the way you organize the book, which is really cool. So I don't want to put my words on top of it. Talk about how you have structured the book.
So why bother writing a book? It's an enormous amount of work to publish a book. I can write a blog post and reach 10 times as many people in one day than working on a book for a year will reach. So why bother? And the reason is because a book is a flag, a signal, and it says, let's talk about this. It's important enough that it should be on the table. Okay. Well, more than half the people who read my books get them in audio or in Kindle, which means there are no page numbers. And the other thing that happens is when we learn, we don't learn all of biology and then chemistry. Yeah. We learn things in layers. That's how we learn from the time we're 1 year old. A little of this, then a little of that, and a little of this. So the book keeps jumping from one thing to another, and each one of the 250 plus riffs is numbered. So now you can go to work and say, I know you're listening to the audiobook, I know you're reading the Kindle. We're going to talk about number 192 today. And we've all know which one 192 is, and it's a 1-page, 2-page riff, and I'm just trying to start a conversation. I don't know the answer, but I think I know the questions, and that's what I'm trying to do with the book.
Yeah, and one of my favorite ones, my absolute favorite one, but I'm obviously self-interested, is number 176. Do you know which one that is?
I did not memorize it. I'm sorry.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't have done that. Not a good use of your cerebral cortex, but I will tell you, it is commodities. And you say we only sell a commodity when we act like we do. Drinking water, clothing, even the source of our electricity. It's possible to bring a story along to create real value for the people we serve. The system, we talked about the system before, seeks to reduce tension by insisting we fit in and offer a commodity. That's a race to the bottom. The successful insurgent creates tension as a response. The tension of FOMO and of networks that must be joined. So thank you for that. I felt, I always search just to see, and I saw it and I was like, oh, good man. Talk about that. Talk about that particular insight, because I thought it was cool.
Okay. So let's say you start a podcast and you want to have ads on the podcast. If you say, I sell ads by the ton, CPM. I have listeners. You want to run an ad for Harry's Razors? I got people with faces. That's a commodity, because Harry says there's 20 podcasts with people with faces. We're going to pick this one because it's cheaper. On the other hand, if you are the one and only, if you are the dominant voice in your category, if you're the person who has the ability to move the needle, don't ask me how many people listen to my podcast, and don't ask me what the CPM is. If you want to sponsor my podcast, it costs this much. Yeah. And I got someone else who'll pay that much, in or out. That is how we push back against the commoditization that's all around us. And it happens in almost every part of our life. We buy something where we paid more than the generic because the story was worth it to us. So people who get frustrated because there's downward pressure, oh, AI can do mediocre copywriting, so I'm out of work as a freelance copywriter. Well, yeah, because you're a mediocre copywriter. But if you were specific, if you were the one we have trouble living without, AI is not your enemy, it's your friend. Because something comes with your work that is more than just the word.
I was recently talking to, this is just such a great point about the influencer world. I was talking to a friend of mine who, she has like 10,000 followers on Instagram. So a small number, but they're really valuable. And she's in a very, very specific niche. She had a video she made, a reel, that got 8 million views. Okay, 8 million views. It's very good. She did a great job. But do you know how many followers? I'm curious what you think. How many followers did she get from that reel?
I don't want to ruin your anecdote. So
No. Just we're say this is play right now.
I'm going to guess 700.
2,000. So you're in the right zone, right? It's like
Yeah.
on an order of magnitude compared to 8 million, we're in the same place, almost nothing.
Yeah.
And what she said to me was like, that was nice. It was a sugar high, as most of this stuff is. But like when you hear about the TikToker that has 1 million views on their video, there was a great article in the journals. There was a TikToker who had like several of these viral things. He made like $57. Yeah. You are much better off to have, you know, the classical like 1,000 true fans or whatever, people who really care about your stuff.
Yeah.
And build that and don't worry about what the system tells you, because all that matters is that you have built something that values what you have created.
Exactly. And if we're going to shift to marketing a little bit here, you will grow not because you go out looking for new followers. You will grow because your followers insist that the people they are friends with get in on the joke. That this podcast, which you have done relentlessly and beautifully, spread because someone's life gets better if their friend listens to it as well. That is the secret of what is happening in our media today.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Seth. So people, everybody listening, if you like this, you should share it with 35 people, you know. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about, you know, you've come out, it's 2024, so the world is very different, as we said, than it was back when like a Porter's 5 Forces was written. Still a lot of value in that, but how does your take, this book, your approach to strategy different from, you know, the conventional wisdom that one would pick up, you know, at, you know, some MBA program?
So strategy started with the Greeks and armies and Alexander the Great and the rest of that. A very limited number of players playing a very specific game that's not particularly complicated. And learning the rules of strategy in that setting, just like chess, is essential. Do not play chess unless you know the standard strategies. But now the world is so much more complex. And Porter's 5 Forces make sense if you're looking for market share and you have 6 competitors and you're a dairy in Western New York or something. But when we're looking at any marketplace that's super fluid, with lots of people coming and going, with reputations that can change in a week, where the rules keep changing, that chess mindset doesn't help you very much, because the rules aren't obvious. They don't hand you the rule book. And one of the things that I did in business school that I was really good at, that saved me from having to do the spreadsheets, was I would look at the case and I would be the kid in the class who would challenge the assumptions about the rules. So one of the famous, and this is interesting to chime in with Porter, one of the most famous business school cases is about a gas chain called Arco. And I don't know if you remember those guys.
I don't remember that one, so I'm excited to hear about it.
ARCO. It was Atlantic Richfield. ARCO. They were all over where I was growing up in Buffalo. And at the time, Texaco and all the rest of them had a charge card that you could use to buy gas. You did business directly with the energy company. And their MBAs had done all this math. Should we keep offering the Arco charge card? Because it costs us money to pay the bank and everything else. Or should we switch to accepting MasterCard or Visa? And everyone in the class is arguing about those things. And I got lucky. And I was like thinking, how do I change the rules here? So I raised my hand. I said they should offer no credit cards, cash only, and be cheaper. We're just going to be the only gas station that doesn't take credit cards, but we're always going to be a nickel cheaper. And that's actually what they did, and it worked great. And the point of that case is you think you know what rules are on offer. You think you know what the options are. But in a world that is changing, there is almost certainly an option you didn't think about first. And so in my career, after I did permission marketing, the book after that, I was about how ideas spread. I just gave it away for free. I just took the whole book and I put it in a PDF, and in the year 2000, anyone who wants it can have it for free. And 4 million people downloaded it in 6 months, which was 400 times more than people expected. And it changed my career. But the rules were you weren't allowed to give a book away for free. So when we see the world changing, we get to see that the rules are changing too.
Yeah, that's a great story about Arco. And I also love that you came up with a strategy that enables money laundering. So that's well done as well.
If you're gonna do money laundering by buying one tank of gas at a time, it's gonna take you a very long time.
You know, people these days, it's hard to make a buck. I want to talk a little bit. You just mentioned a really great example of not sticking to your knitting, thinking differently, trying something differently, and then winning from it. And what tends to happen with incumbents, right? We all know, I mean, I'm just saying things that we all know, but let me just say it, which is that incumbents tend to stick with their strategy. And that's why they get destroyed by the up and comers. And that happens over and over again in business. And if you look at the Fortune 500 today versus 20 years ago, like it's a whole different group of companies, right?
Yeah.
So how does one identify, you know, given your thinking in this new book, how do you identify when the current strategy isn't working?
This is such a great prompt. Thank you. I don't know if you got to interview Tom Peters before he retired.
No.
But my friend Tom, in Search of Excellence, one of the rules is stick to your knitting.
Yeah.
And what he meant was not do what you did yesterday, but get very clear about what your knitting is. So Western Union had the chance to buy the phone company, and they didn't do it because they thought their knitting was the telegram, not communication. Yahoo had the chance to buy Google for $10 million, and they didn't do it because they thought their knitting was the homepage of Yahoo, not how do we explore the internet. So when you stick to your knitting, you got to be very clear. Who are you trying to change, and what is the change you seek to make? That shouldn't change very often. But the tactics we use to accomplish that have to change all the time. Right. And so, you know, the New York Times is now a game company that has a news division because Wordle accounts for more of their traffic and more of their revenue.
Yeah.
What exactly is the change the New York Times seeks to make, and who are they trying to change? It's not clear that changing their strategy to be a games company is going to end well for them, which is why there are voices inside the Times that say, no, our job is to bring a certain kind of news to a certain kind of person. And if we're going to pay some of the bills with games, that's fine. But we're never going to be a games company. We're going to do this thing. That's what we stand for. And so when the world changes, we got to keep coming back to who is it for and what's it for.
FOMO. Somebody was telling me an interesting insight recently, which totally maps to this, which is that most people are followers. And so when you ask for advice from them, you get a follower's advice. And when I think about this in the context of like corporate strategy, like if you hire the management consulting firm or the investment bank, or if you have the entrenched manager who has risen to the top by just executing the same playbook, they have no incentive to think differently. And you're going to end up, so just for everybody who's listening, like when you ask for advice from people, and people tend to do this, they canvas, making a big decision. They're like, let me ask 50 people. And then they're like, well, everybody told me not to do this. Of course, because people are generally, you got to ask Seth if you want to get a spicy answer.
And they care about you. So they're trying to protect you from failure.
Yeah.
There is a couple of riffs in the book. Pick your customers, pick your future, pick your competitors, pick your future, pick your critics, pick your future. So based on who you are trying to please, you are deciding who you are going to become. And so what I decided 12 years ago is I stopped reading my Amazon reviews. 1 star, 5 star, all of them. And that's because I had never once met an author who said, I read all my 1 star reviews and now I'm better at writing.
Yeah.
That all a 1 star review tells you is this book wasn't for me. Okay, thanks, but that doesn't tell me anything about the book. It tells me about you. So if you read all your negative feedback, it's going to change who you become. You're someone who's trying to please people who give you negative feedback. And that might be appropriate in some cases, and in other cases, not so much. And so, you know, if Muhammad Ali had spent a lot of time with people who hated boxing, I'm not sure what he would have done. So we got to figure out who are you surrounding yourself with, who are you making sales to, who you're trying to please, because that's going to determine the noise in your head.
Yeah. And also, anybody who takes the time to troll somebody on Amazon isn't, I mean, who are those people? We're going to jump to the lightning round in a second, but I have one last question, which is this. You do something cool in this book, which is that, and I hadn't seen this before, so this is very new, which we obviously expect from you. You empower your reader to use generative AI. You suggest using Claude in the process of going through the book. So talk about, I mean, it's such a great idea. Like, how can we integrate these kinds of new tools, GPT, Claude, whatever, into learning when we read a book like yours?
Okay, so Claude.ai, I have no comp in this, lets you upload documents. And the first time I did it, I uploaded a 40-page business plan that had been written by 7 people. And I said, find the contradictions and outline the hard parts. And it gave me a 1-page memo that was brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant analysis. So if you're thinking of making a decision, write it up in detail and then upload it to Claude and pick some of the questions. There's more than 500 questions in the book. Pick some of the questions in the book and say, how am I doing on this question or that question or this question? And now you don't have any shame in it because it's not a person. And it can say, you didn't get this part at all. And if you do this for 20 minutes a day for a week, you're going to start thinking differently about your project, because it's going to highlight for you, in the spirit of my book, where your project has the current pushing it and where you're going to have a real challenge.
It's unbiased.
Well,
Right.
It's not
biased, but it's not trying to please you, is it?
Correct. That's correct.
Right. It's an LLM, so there's bias in it, but it's not like your mom who's going to be like, honey, you did such a great job in this memo.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
All right. So let's jump to the lightning round. We've got 4 questions. Number 1 is this. What is a favorite quote?
So Yoyodyne, the company I started that invented email marketing, was based on a movie called Buckaroo Banzai. And Buckaroo Banzai, the corporation in it, their slogan is, where the future begins tomorrow. And for whatever reason, that has always sat with me.
So good. And thanks for inventing email marketing. I really appreciate you. All right. Number 2, one book or podcast that every FOMO Sapiens should know about.
The War of Art by Steve Pressfield.
Number 3, one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self.
So I have failed more than most people, and I'm proud of it. The failures were more important than the successes. So if I gave my young self advice that would avoid a failure, that wouldn't be good, because then I wouldn't be me. So instead, the only thing I would say is it's going to be okay.
Yeah, so true. Final one. What's your most important memory?
It has to do with my parents, who I miss very much. Probably the time when I was 12 or 13 and we were walking through the North Woods of Canada together.
I love it. That's beautiful. See, it's that question, you never know where you're going to get. And it's just these, I feel like I'm there, right? It's crazy how I've never met your parents. I didn't have that pleasure, but I almost feel like I'm there with you. Yeah. Oh, so good. Thank you, Seth. Now, if you want to learn more about Seth, you can head over to Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter.
No, don't go to Twitter. Don't go
no
to
Twitter. Oh, we're not. Okay, that was on the list. So no Twitter. Where should we go?
Going to Twitter.
Where do you want us to go?
Seths.blog.
Seths.blog.
There's 9,000 posts there. And if you go to Seths.blog/TIS, there's all sorts of bonuses about the new book.
All right. Seth Godin, author of This Is Strategy and many other books. Thanks a lot for being here.
What a pleasure. Keep making a ruckus. We need you.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.